They called her the quiet one, the serious sister who never smiled. But when a high society engagement party spirals into a web of financial deceit, vanishing fugitives, and judicial betrayal, Judge Clarisse Dalton steps out of the shadows. In a world where appearances protect criminals and silence buries truth, she must use everything she's learned in court to expose the people who never saw her coming. Because the most powerful verdicts aren't always delivered with a gavel, they're earned in the dark. My name is Clarisse Dalton, and I've spent most of my adult life behind a bench, unraveling lies with a steady hand and an unreadable expression. For over a decade, my courtroom has been a theater of fractured truths, and I've played the role of the impartial oracle. People assumed I was made of marble, cold carved, impossible to chip, but they never knew how carefully I had built that shell, not to repel the world, but to survive it. Camille, my younger sister, was the opposite of everything I was taught to value. Where I was order, she was chaos wrapped in charm. Where I stood still and studied, she danced, flitted, floated from party to party, her laughter trailing behind like perfume. She had always been the sun, and I had been told to be grateful just to orbit around her. We were born 2 years apart, in a quiet suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina, to a family that looked whole from the outside. Our father was a finance executive whose attention could be measured in passing glances, and our mother was a socialite whose days revolved around garden luncheons and designer showrooms. Camille inherited her sparkle, her vanity, her desperate need to be adored. I inherited the quiet, the stillness, the need to understand. As a child, Camille was the girl who choreographed dances in the living room and made friends with ease. I was the girl who read Supreme Court decisions under the dinner table and corrected adults when they quoted the Constitution incorrectly. Our parents smiled at her antics. They blinked at my questions. "She's just intense," my mother would murmur when I asked why Camille got away with everything. "Don't take things so seriously, Clarisse." But I always did. I took everything seriously. Every skipped birthday, every whispered insult, every time Camille looked at me like I was a burden wearing shoes. I left for college 2 weeks after high school graduation, didn't come home that summer, and never looked back. Law school became my refuge. Rules made sense there. People spoke in facts, not feelings. I graduated early, clerked for a federal judge, and was appointed to the Superior Court bench by the time I was 38. That robe became my armor, my life's reward for years of invisibility. And yet, even in the sanctity of my chambers, the past had a way of reaching through the keyhole. It began with a text. "Hey sis, I know it's been a while, but I wanted to invite you to something important. Please say yes. Love, Camille." No explanation, just a digital olive branch scented with desperation. I stared at the screen, coffee cooling in my hand, heart unsure whether to beat faster or not at all. I hadn't spoken to Camille in nearly 2 years. The last time we'd been in the same room, she had told a joke at my expense so cutting, even the punchline felt like a wound. I typed back a short response. "What is it?" Her reply came quickly. "Engagement party. And Jonathan. Saturday night. I want you there. I'll send the invite." Jonathan Pierce. That name sparked something. I had heard it before, months ago, during a securities fraud case. One of the executives from Calitech, a company with federal heat circling it like vultures, had mentioned a Jonathan Pierce during his deposition. Nothing major, just a name in a transcript. But something about it itched now. Still, I agreed, not because I wanted to see Camille, but because a part of me, a darker and more calculating part, needed to understand. I had spent a lifetime studying what people do, not what they say. Camille's sudden sweetness? It reeked of an agenda. The party was held at the Avalon Estate, a venue known for two things: overpriced canapés and the way it overlooked the entire city like royalty. The kind of place Camille had once mocked as old money trying too hard. Yet here she was, renting the very image she used to ridicule. I arrived early, parked my car near the edge of the lot, and sat for a moment, watching as the valet boys laughed among themselves as the sky bled pink across the hills. My fingers tapped against the steering wheel as a flicker of doubt crossed my mind. I wasn't just attending a party. I was stepping back into a house of mirrors, one where every reflection had been warped by memory, jealousy, and silence inside. The scene was orchestrated with Camille's signature flair: lush white roses, golden string lights, a jazz trio in the corner playing Sinatra. Guests floated in curated clusters, each with a glass in hand and a story on their lips. I passed through them unnoticed, a ghost in a fitted black dress. Camille spotted me within seconds. She was radiant, of course, dressed in blush silk, her hair in a soft chignon, her smile practiced to perfection. She crossed the room like a social tide. "Clarisse, you came!" she said, pulling me into a hug that felt like a trap disguised as affection. "I did," I replied, voice cool. "Congratulations." She pulled back and studied me. "Still with the black, huh?" "Still suits me." Jonathan approached them. He was taller than I expected. Broad shoulders, sharp features, a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "You must be the famous sister." Camille said so much. I raised an eyebrow. "I doubt that." He laughed, but it sounded rehearsed. The rest of the evening was a blur of tight smiles, polite snubs, and Camille's passive jabs disguised as nostalgia. Then, as I stood by the balcony overlooking the city, I heard it. Two women were whispering behind me. "Did you hear about Jonathan's company? SEC's looking into them. Something about offshore accounts. Camille doesn't care. She just wants the ring." My heart paused. Like a courtroom just before the verdict, I turned slightly, careful not to draw attention, and listened. "My cousin works at Calitech," she said. "Someone high up flipped. There's going to be arrests." Flipped? That word was everything. Suddenly, the engagement wasn't a celebration. It was a cover, a shield, a diversion, and Camille wanted me there. Not out of love, but for protection. I smiled faintly and sipped my champagne. The game had begun. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen, the light from the window casting a sharp line across the granite counter. My phone rested face up beside a cooling cup of coffee. The news app opened to a headline that made my stomach shift. "Calitech under investigation by SEC, sources say internal whistleblower comes forward." Jonathan Pierce's name wasn't in the article. Not yet. But I knew how these things worked. When the dominoes started falling, the tallest pieces fell last, publicly, spectacularly. And if Jonathan was even peripherally involved, his name was already written in someone's sealed file. Camille didn't know. Of that, I was certain. She was many things, but subtle wasn't one of them. If she had known about the looming investigation, she would have weaponized it, found a way to twist it into drama, not desperation. Her sudden need to reconcile, the sugary invitation, the performance at the party, it was all a distraction. She wasn't hiding the truth. She was hiding from it. I called a friend at the U.S. Attorney's office under the pretense of catching up. I asked about Calitech. He laughed. "You know I can't comment on open cases." "I know. That's why I'm asking off the record." There was a pause. Then, "You didn't hear it from me, but keep your eyes on the finance chief. Some heavy hitters are about to come down." Finance chief. Jonathan's last known role at Calitech had been executive VP of finance. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The line went quiet. That silence, thick, deliberate, knowing, told me more than any headline could. I opened my laptop and searched the company again. Beneath the press releases and quarterly reports, I found a buried article 2 months old about internal restructuring. Jonathan's name was missing from the current executive list. So either he had stepped down quietly or been pushed, and now he was marrying Camille. I sat back and exhaled. She didn't know she was climbing into a burning building. Or worse, she did and was hoping I could be her extinguisher. My doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Not this early. I checked the security cam and nearly laughed. Camille, standing there in oversized sunglasses, a tooth-thin trench coat, and a scarf knotted like she'd stepped out of a bad noir film. Her arms were crossed tightly, her mouth a sharp line. I opened the door slowly. "Well," I said, "this is unexpected." She stepped inside without asking. That was always her way. "I need to talk to you," she said, peeling off her glasses. Her eyes were tired, not made up, not dramatic, just worn. Go on. Did you know about Jonathan? About his company? I didn't answer. Not at first. Jess walked into the kitchen and poured her a cup of coffee. I overheard something at the party, she continued. Something about investigations. Offshore. Accounts. And you came here instead of asking him? She winced. I tried. He deflected, said it was nothing. And you believed him. I wanted to. But then you showed up, and then you weren't just you, Clarisse. You were something more. Something solid. And he noticed. I studied her face. There was something raw in her voice. Real. You think he's using you? She hesitated, then nodded. You think I can help? Another nod. I sipped my coffee. That depends. On what? On whether you want the truth or a version you can survive. The next week unraveled like a courtroom cross-examination. Camille began forwarding me emails, messages from Jonathan's assistant, vague replies, cancelled meetings. A sudden prenup agreement was drafted without her input. I reviewed each document like evidence, building a timeline. Then came the call. An unknown number. Judge Dalton? This is Agent Moreno, FBI. We're following up on a sealed case you presided over last year. Your name came up during a deposition. We'd like to speak with you in person. I met them 2 days later at a nondescript federal office. Agent Moreno was polite, efficient, and used to walking through landmines. Jonathan Pierce, he said, sliding a file across the table. We believe he's moving funds through shell companies linked to a defunct offshore holding in the Caymans. The whistleblower mentioned his fiancé might be a liability. My jaw tensed. A liability? How? She's on paperwork. Unwittingly, maybe. But it means she's connected. They showed me bank records. Camille's name. A signature she didn't remember signing. A fund transfer from an account she didn't know she had. My stomach twisted. She was being set up. When I confronted Camille that night, her hands shook. I never signed anything. I swear. He told me it was just to reserve a villa in Greece for the honeymoon. You've been used as a financial mule. That account? It's laundering money. She collapsed onto the couch, her confidence splintering. I stood above her. Heart torn. She had lied to me, belittled me, ignored me for years. But she didn't deserve this. You're going to do exactly what I say. I told her. No arguments, no flair, and above all no contact with Jonathan. Why? What are you going to do? I'm going to build a case. She looked up, tears catching on her lashes. Clarisse. Save it. I picked up my phone, dialed a number I hadn't used in years. The voice on the other end answered with a dry chuckle. Well, Judge Dalton. I wondered when you'd call. I need a forensic accountant. One you trust. Quiet. Efficient. Going after a husband? Worse. A future one. The case had started, but the trial wouldn't be in court. It would be in secrets, leverage, and the slow unraveling of trust. And no one, not even Camille, was ready for what I was about to expose. When you've spent a career parsing truth from theatrics, you develop instincts sharper than suspicion. Mine had been dormant with Camille for years, numbed, maybe, by apathy, but now they hummed like wires in a storm. Jonathan wasn't just a conman with charm. He was deliberate. And Camille, the eternal performer, was his most convenient alibi. I sat alone in chambers late into the night. Court files stacked to one side. Jonathan Pierce's name typed into every search bar that mattered. A knock on my door pulled me from the screen. Come in. It was Mason Lynn, my former law clerk, now working with a boutique forensic firm I'd once referred clients to. He was 32, methodical, and discreet, a necessary trifecta. You called. I came. What's the target? I slid the file folder across the desk. Pierce, former CFO at Calitech. Camille's fiancé. He's prepping to run, or bury her, or both. Mason flipped through the pages, eyes narrowing. You want a paper trail. I want evidence. Something admissible. Something irrefutable. He paused. And Camille? She's a target too? I hesitated. She's in the crossfire. He nodded once and left. No questions. That was why I'd called him. 3 days passed in quiet maneuvers. Camille stayed in my guest room, her phone surrendered, her eyes wide with the terror of someone slowly realizing her life was not her own. I didn't comfort her. That wasn't my role. I gave her facts, clarity, deadlines, and instructions. If Jonathan contacts you, log it, record it, and alert me. Say nothing else. She obeyed. For once, on the fourth day, Mason returned. He's liquidating assets under false names, he said without preamble. Trusts in Luxembourg, foundations in Belize. Camille's name is on 2 of them. That prenup? It's a decoy. If she signs it, she legally distances herself from all claims, which gives him free rein to shift funds internationally. She becomes both a shield and a scapegoat. I let the words settle. Camille sat across the room, barely breathing. Can you prove it? Mason pulled a flash drive from his pocket. I already have. The next step wasn't legal. It was strategic. I contacted Agent Moreno. I have something. Not enough for prosecution, but enough to pressure. You want the rest? I'll deliver Jonathan, but you leave Camille out. A long silence. You're sure she's clean? She's stupid, not criminal. All right, bring it in. Camille clutched my arm as I hung up. Are you sure they won't arrest me? No, I said, but I am sure they want him more. We staged it carefully. Camille invited Jonathan to a neutral location, a rooftop restaurant she had frequented during law school weekends. She wore a wire. Mason and I monitored nearby, eyes locked on the laptop streaming live audio. Jonathan arrived late. He kissed her cheek like nothing had shifted, but his voice held caution. You look tired. I haven't been sleeping. Worried. About something? She hesitated. Then perfectly, the money, the accounts, the prenup. Jonathan stilled. Who have you been talking to? No one. Just Jonathan. If there's something I should know, you need to tell me. Camille, he said, voice tight. This is not the place. Then when? After I'm indicted? There it was. The mask cracked. A moment of silence. Then, you need to trust me. I've protected you. Everything I've done for. She cut in. Don't. Just tell me the truth. Or don't. But I'm not signing anything until I do. The feed went quiet. Mason and I exchanged a glance. 10 minutes later, Agent Moreno texted. He took the bait. He's on the move. Our team is tracking now. Jonathan never returned to the table. He left through the back, fled to a rental condo registered under a shell entity. By dawn, the feds had raided it. He was gone. Vanished. But he left behind more than evidence. He left behind a digital trail Mason's team would spend weeks untangling, enough to prosecute 3 others in his web. Camille was never charged. Her signature on those accounts had been forged. Her involvement, though careless, wasn't criminal, but nothing went back to normal. We sat together weeks later, on my balcony, watching dusk stain the sky. You saved me, Camille whispered. I uncovered the truth. You saved yourself by facing it. She smiled faintly. You were right. I never really saw you. No one ever asked to. We said nothing for a long time, just sat in the kind of silence I had spent my whole life building. But this time, it wasn't armor. It was peace. Until a knock came at the door. A man stood there, mid-40s. Suit is too clean. Smile too easily, Judge Dalton. My name is Ian Calder. I'm with the Internal Affairs Office. May I come in? I narrowed my eyes. Internal Affairs? What's this about? He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a photo. Jonathan, alive, smiling. Next, to a man I recognized from an old case I'd ruled on, a confidential informant who had disappeared 2 years ago. Ian's voice was quiet. We think there's more to this story than offshore accounts. Much more. And just like that, the case wasn't closed. It had only just begun. The envelope weighed almost nothing, but it sat in my hands like a gavel about to drop. Jonathan's face, smiling beside a known fugitive. What kind of connection are we talking about? I asked Ian Calder. We're not sure, he said, but we've traced offshore transactions from Jonathan's shell entities to accounts linked to missing funds from a classified D operation. You ruled on one of the seizure orders 4 years ago. Eastman v. U.S. government. I remembered the case. A murky intersection of narcotics, informants, and assets gone missing. You think Jonathan was laundering cartel money? That's one theory. Another is that he was helping move the assets of compromised informants for someone on the inside. Corruption. And witnesses who vanished right before testifying. My mind started assembling the implications. Jonathan wasn't just a corporate parasite, he was a ghost courier for the kind of secrets that got people killed. So why me? I asked. Ian's eyes were steady. Because you know the players. And because he knows you. 2 days later, I received a burner phone in a plain brown envelope. It rang only once before I picked up. Hello, Clarisse. The voice was smooth, controlled, familiar. Jonathan, you've been busy, I said. I never meant to involve Camille. But you did. A pause. I didn't expect you to care. You should have. I'm giving you an opportunity, he said. There are files in a locker at Union Station. You'll want to see them. I'm giving you this because you're the only one who might understand what's really at stake. And why would I help you? Because what's in those files could burn down more than a courtroom. He hung up. Mason and I drove to Union Station, retrieved a sealed manila folder from a locker secured with a digital code. Inside, copies of sealed testimony from confidential sources, encrypted wire transfers linked to former law enforcement officials, and one photograph that made my breath stall. A judge, sitting beside Jonathan, laughing. Not just any judge. Judge Emery Banks, my mentor, the man who'd written my recommendation for the bench. He was retired now, a darling of the legal community, beyond reproach. Until now. Camille came home late that night. She looked more like herself, worn but waking. I didn't tell her everything. Just that Jonathan had resurfaced and that he was far more dangerous than either of us had assumed. She sat down across from me. Do you ever wish you'd never become a judge? No, even when it means knowing the things no one else wants to see. Especially then. She nodded. Then tell me what to do. Because I want to help. You already have. Over the next week, I prepared a brief for Ian Calder. Mason vetted the evidence. We laid out a map of connections, financial trails, and hidden allegiances, some buried so deep they hadn't seen daylight in over a decade. But the problem wasn't proof. It was trust. The Dodge wouldn't open this file without a trusted source. And if Judge Banks was involved, that left only one place to go. A courtroom. My courtroom. I filed a petition to unseal portions of the Eastman case. My authority allowed it under post-sentencing review, but it sent ripples. The media sniffed something. Then, the threats started. First, an envelope with a single photograph of me, leaving my chambers. Then, a voicemail. People who dig into the past often find themselves buried in it. Camille panicked. I didn't. Because fear didn't control me anymore. It fueled me. The night before the hearing, someone broke into my home. They didn't steal anything. Just moved a single framed photo from my graduation with Judge Banks to the center of my bed. It was a message. I packed a bag, took Camille to a secure hotel, alerted Ian. Then I returned to my bench and faced the verdict myself. The hearing was public. Banks was there, sitting in the front row, composed. He spoke when called, measured, charming, deferential. Judge Dalton, he said at one point, I've always admired your integrity. I didn't blink. Then you'll respect that today. We put everything on the record. By the time the session ended, the courtroom was dead silent. Mason had prepared a visual timeline. Ian's agents confirmed the links. Camille, seated quietly behind the press row, watched with wide eyes. And Banks? He never looked surprised, just tired. As if he'd known, from the moment I stepped into his courtroom as a young intern, that I'd be the one to expose him. Jonathan was arrested 2 weeks later. He'd crossed into Spain, then Malta. But someone inside turned him in. I received no thank you. Only a letter. Unsigned. Inside, a single line. The truth changes nothing, but it changes you. Camille left town, started over in Oregon. We talked occasionally, not about the past, not about Jonathan, just small things. But for the first time, it felt real. My bench remains. My chambers are quiet. But now, when I speak, I know what silence costs, and I know the weight of being seen.